Hello, folks. I really am Luke Swetland, President and CEO of your Museum and Sea Center. I'm delighted to welcome you all here this afternoon. This is the first of a new series that we're calling The Natural History of Wine and Spirits. Each episode will pair distinctive wines or spirits with a natural history topic. We think that's a pretty cool concept, and it really squares with our mission to connect people to nature for the betterment of both. So we're here this afternoon in the museum's beautiful backyard. And you know, from the moment we opened the backyard, it became Santa Barbara's backyard. Many a young person has played in a creek for the first time here, has climbed a tree for the first time here, and has jumped off a big boulder, much to their mother's dismay. But we've never lost a kid. It's a fun place. And today, being in our backyard also allows us all to be outside. And the 3 households that are participating today live are all very safely distant. And as you can see, except for when we're trying wonderful wine, we will all be wearing face coverings. Let's get right to it. I'd like to introduce the talent. Katie Grassini, owner of Grassini Family Vineyards. Her husband, Dean McKillen, who's Grassini's national salesman. 2 of my colleagues from the museum, Dr. Jonathan Hoffman, who's the Dibblee Curator of Earth Sciences, and Ms. Kim Zembick, our senior manager of guest services. We just call her Kim, and she's wonderful. All right. So Katie, I understand we're going to start with a 2017 Sauvignon Blanc. Let's get after it.
Yes, well, we are very excited to be here today. Yeah. So excited to share our wines with you guys and with everybody at home. And can't beat the backdrop. I mean, this is just absolutely gorgeous. So
amazing.
Right. So we're really thrilled, and there's nothing better than starting the afternoon with a little glass of Sauvignon Blanc. So we might as well just dive right into that.
Let's have a taste.
Yeah, we've got our, today we're sharing with you our 2019 Happy Canyon Sauvignon Blanc, which is my mother's very, very favorite wine. And I am a big fan as well.
And your parents should be watching tonight, right?
Yes, they are. They're watching at home. So hi, Mom. Hi, Dad.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
And what are some good tips to taste white wine?
Absolutely. So, well, with any wine, I should probably let you take.
Yeah. So Sauvignon Blanc. This is all estate grown. This is all from the flat portion of our property. 100% Sauvignon Blanc. We age this in stainless steel. And we're looking for it to be very bright, very easy drinking, nice acidity to it.
So what you would want to do is kind of swirl it around.
Yeah.
Give a little swirl.
And that we do to kind of open it up a little bit.
Yeah.
Let it breathe a little bit. And then, you know, don't be shy. Get your nose right in there.
Yeah, so very nice fruit to it. We're looking for really nice, bright acidity and structure to it. Really nice finish. It shines through with the stainless steel.
The fruit is more maybe like stone fruit kind of things.
Very much so.
Sweet, yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. We get a lot of stone fruit, so like peaches, apricots, things of that nature. Yeah. A little bit of tropical fruit as well, you know, on the palate. The fun thing about tasting wine and describing what you're smelling or tasting is that there's really there's no wrong answer. It's all 100% based on what your experience in life has been. So if you've never smelt apricot, you're not going to be able to pick that up and describe it. So it's a very unique sort of experience, wine tasting.
And you could say it's part of your daily fruit
diet. Absolutely.
Yes.
I mean,
You're
I'm not a doctor, but I would say.
Yeah.
Jonathan, you're a doctor.
Yeah, I recommend it.
Okay.
There we go.
Yeah.
You just have to get 1 out of 5 doctors to recommend it.
Right.
Fantastic.
I'm in.
I like that.
And what made you choose to grow the Sauvignon Blanc grape on the vineyard versus other grapes that you could have picked?
Oh, absolutely. So where our vineyard is located is over on the far eastern side of the Santa Ynez Valley, which is in this really beautiful AVA called Happy Canyon. It got its name, back in the day. We were to get an AVA status, you have to go and ask the federal government for permission, and you have to kind of show them why this area is so different, which you're going to hear a lot about today. And our family was lucky to be one of the original families to petition because we knew it was such a special place. And what makes it so special is the warm, hot, sunny days that we get. So as we know, Santa Barbara has this transverse mountain range that tends to bring in the fog and the maritime influence, which is, if you're over in Santa Rita Hills, you'll see that fog, you'll feel it really rolling in and staying around for a lot of the day and cooling things off. It's perfect for Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, wines like that. Over where we are on the eastern side of the valley in Happy Canyon, the transverse mountain range is kind of starting to straighten out a little bit. We don't get quite as much of that maritime influence. We'll get the fog in the morning, but then it rolls out really early, and it just gives way to these beautiful long days full of warm, hot sunshine, which is exactly what Bordeaux varietals love. They're a thicker skinned grape, and they need a lot of sunshine and warmth, a lot of heat days in order to ripen fully to get those flavors that we want to achieve. And so, with wine is one of those products where you really have to listen to Mother Nature, and she's going to dictate.
She's the big boss.
Yep, exactly. So she told us to plant the Bordeaux varietals, and we're glad we listened to her.
Absolutely.
And so you only grow one type of white wine grape on your property.
Yes, yeah. We only grow Sauvignon Blanc. We have a couple different clones of it, but that's the one varietal. So we have a Muscat clone of Sauvignon Blanc, which tends to give it a lot more of the aromatics that you get. So when you're smelling it, that's really what the Muscat clone is giving a lot of that.
It's so enjoyable. I feel like I can drink this consistently without realizing how much I drink.
Oh, yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. We one of our tasting room associates, Autumn, she tends to call this her Dr. Seuss wine because she could drink it with a fox, she could drink it in a box, she could drink it in a boat, like the whole
Here,
thing.
there, and everywhere.
Exactly.
Yeah, that sounds like a good rhyme. Even as a mother, you could probably,
Right?
Kids would never know.
They'll
You're
never
also
pick up.
drinking wine. Just start rhyming everything with
Exactly.
it. You drink it in a creek. Drink it at a
Right?
museum. No, it doesn't quite rhyme.
I know, it's hard to
Well,
rhyme with
fall apart.
museum.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
We'll get creative as the night goes.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
We'll have to keep drinking more
Right.
and more.
For
Yeah.
inspiration.
Yeah. I can tell the wheels are probably turning out there, and I want to see what other folks say as their rhymes.
Yeah, it's good, and we should probably drink this chilled. Dean, you cool your white wine.
Yeah. The
Before you-
easiest way to think about wine is imagine enjoying wine in an old castle.
Yeah.
It's much cooler than what we have here. So I would always say the whites are, especially our Sauvignon Blanc, enjoy it around 45, 50 degrees. And then we'll talk a little more about the Articondo here, but enjoy the Articondo 60, 65.
Yeah.
Yeah. Leave
they're-
it to the Irish guy to talk about castles.
Temperatures of castles is perfect.
Right?
That's that's kind of a nice range. There's no, you just enjoy it a little cooler. The hotter a red wine is, typically the more alcohol it'll seem hotter to taste it.
Okay.
And you're currently in harvest right now.
We are.
Do you harvest both varietals? Do you do all the grapes at once, or do you do different times of year for different varieties?
So usually the Sauvignon Blanc will come in about a month earlier than the red varietals. It's just ready to go a little bit sooner. But because we're in a state vineyard, which means, the winery's right there in the middle of the vineyard, we have the fortune to be able to go out and taste each block, every vine as much as we want, as often as we want.
Oh, wow.
So our winemaker, Bradley, who you'll meet in the video today, he is going out there constantly, especially as we get closer to harvest, and tasting, little grapes here and there, just to kind of see, is he getting the flavors that he wants, that he's looking for. And we're able, with our crew, they're such wonderful folks. The same folks that planted the vines are still working on them now today. They're able to go out and say only pick a few rows from a block, and then the next day go out and pick a couple different rows, so we can really be precise about when we want to pick
Full
the
control.
different grapes. Yeah.
So I know we're going to be talking about it a little bit in the video, but it sounds like that there's quite a bit of variation from one row to the next on the environmental conditions, really getting back to that idea of microclimates.
Yes.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
yeah. We're fortunate, so we've got 104 acres out there, and we've got 35 acres planted to vine, and it's a really dynamic piece of property with a couple hillsides that the winery is sort of placed in between, and then in addition with the flat area in the
Yeah.
center, and it's just that kind of gives us a lot of different things going on the different blocks.
Yes.
And so
Is
Yeah.
that where you chose the Sauvignon Blanc grape to grow?
Yep, yeah. So the Sauvignon Blanc grows on the flat section of the vineyard, but I could talk to you all day about that.
Yeah.
But I have a feeling that Bradley Long, our winemaker, he's going to talk a lot about that on the video that we're about to watch. So I think it's probably better to
Fantastic.
let him take it away.
Yeah,
and,
share the story.
Enjoy
Yeah.
the rest of your white while we watch the video.
Absolutely.
Yeah, sounds great.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Enjoy.
Hello, I'm Jonathan Hoffman. I'm the Dibblee Curator of Earth Science at the Santa Barbara Museum of Natural History. This morning I'm speaking to you from the eastern end of the Santa Ynez Valley, and we're standing here on property owned by the Midland School, an environmental high school that uses their wonderful natural setting to teach students about nature. And what better place to learn about nature than out here? The Santa Ynez Valley is a world-renowned winemaking region, and it owes a lot of its success to the variation in topography that creates microclimates. And this all relates back to the geologic history of our region. The complex tectonic history of our region was pieced together by UC Santa Barbara Earth Science professor Dr. Tanya Atwater. 18 million years ago, the land that would become Santa Barbara was located far to the south, close to modern-day San Diego. This land broke off of the North American plate and started heading to the northwest with the Pacific plate. At around 6 million years ago, this chunk of land began to pivot, starts to collide again with the rest of North America. This resulted in the uplift of this chunk of land, and that uplift pushed up the Channel Islands as well as all of the mountains in the transverse ranges, including Grass Mountain behind us. The rocks exposed through the uplift include sedimentary rocks that date back to the Mesozoic era. During the Mesozoic, the area that would become Santa Barbara was underwater. The oldest rocks exposed in the Santa Ynez Valley are rocks from the Franciscan Complex, an assemblage of Mesozoic marine rocks that have been metamorphosed. We find examples of these throughout the valley. It's not uncommon to see large bluish-green swaths of exposed rock. These colors are great indicators of the presence of a very special rock called serpentinite. Serpentinite, which is also California's state rock, is a metamorphic rock composed of serpentine, a metamorphic mineral. It's also common to come across red rocks that contain the mineral cinnabar. At one point, cinnabar was heavily mined in our area because it contains mercury. It takes a lot of detective work to figure out our geologic history. Tom Dibblee was a structural geologist and geologic mapper, widely revered for his great volume of work. The Dibblee Foundation was responsible for publishing over 400 of Tom's geologic maps, which are now held at the Santa Barbara Museum of Natural History. Their beautiful color scheme is consistent in terms of which rock layers they represent. And we'll be using Dibblee maps to show where we are today. It's this unique east-west trending mountain range and coastline that gives the Santa Ynez Valley its variation in climate. Marine air currents blow into the Santa Ynez Valley from the northwest, making the western end cooler than the eastern end. Additionally, all of the topography from crunching this landmass together as it collided back into the North American continental plate, has created numerous microclimates in the ripples of land. That's part of the reason that on a single vineyard, you can have enough topographic variation to benefit growing one type of grape on one part of the property and a different type of grape on another part of the property. Climate is essential in winemaking, but there's a host of other variables, everything from the drainage of the local soils to the directionality of slopes that can factor into which kind of grapes you're going to grow and how you're going to grow them, and even how you will treat the wine after you've harvested. So to better understand the winemaking process and how winemakers take into account the geology and topography of their area, we're going to go visit the Grassini Vineyard. We're getting a rare behind-the-scenes look. This is a really special treat, and we're going to be talking with Bradley Long, the winemaker, as well as Katie Grassini, their owner, and her husband, Dean McKillen, who heads up their national sales. We'll also meet a member of my household, Kim Zembick, who's this SBM&H museum store manager, and also loves wine.
So we're here in this canyon and we have slopes and this flat along the center of this little inlet here. Everything planted in the flats is Sauvignon Blanc. That's the only white grape that we grow here. And it actually happens to be most resilient to frost and freeze. Whereas Cabernet Sauvignon and all of our red varieties are on the hillsides for that cold, dense air to drain into the flat to an area that is more manageable and resilient to those climate conditions. Farming grapes on slopes and having well-drained soils does not play very well in terms of water retention. We really rely on our cover crops during the winter months to help promote certain retentions inside those soils.
That's pretty interesting. I never think about what you might be growing in the off-season.
Yeah.
And how that really has a big effect on your growing season.
It does. Barley grass is what we grow. It's tubular in structure, so it opens up the soil and also helps it retain as much water as possible during those rainy months. Every other row will plant legumes, which will end up being cultivated into the earth as a nitrogen fixer.
So the plants that you are growing in the off-season are helping out with the soil chemistry, it sounds like. What about the soils themselves? Are there any differences between the soils on the flats versus the soils on the slopes?
The soils on the flats tend to be a little more alluvial, whereas the soils on the slopes are a little more grainy and really representative of the geology of the area in terms of the rocks. The soils really differ from this creek right here. The flats on that side of the creek and on the hillsides are mainly magnesium-rich soils from the serpentine, which is very prominent in all of the Santa Ynez Valley. Whereas on this side of the creek, we have more calcareous soils, which is more calcium-rich. Generally speaking, calcium is what the vine likes to be more healthy. The calcium allows its absorption of minerals and nutrients a lot easier than a magnesium-rich soil. We do add amendments. On that side of our property, we amend with gypsum and compost mostly. We lose about 1 to 1.5% of our organic matter throughout a growing season. Using compost helps us put more organic matter back into the earth, and we'll cultivate that in during the same time that we'll cultivate our legumes in from the cover crop. So gypsum, we'll put it across the vineyard, and when it dissolves during the rain, it allows more calcium for the vine to absorb the nutrients and minerals that it needs. Growing our grapes in a more calcium-rich environment allows them to end up being a happier vine, being able to mature both in sugar ripeness and also phenolic ripeness, which includes taste, color, and mouthfeel. It allows the grape to become fully ripe on all aspects.
Is it so that you can create the same sort of wine year to year, or Do you ever play with that soil year to year?
I think it's important to create consistency. Where our nuances come from and variations in the wines is the vintage itself. How much rainfall did we get that year? How many sunny days did we have? How many super hot days where the vines shut down? How many super cold nights where the vines shut down? So on and so forth are more vintage based rather than messing with the soil itself to create different flavors and different variations there. We are headed up this hill to look at some of our red variety blocks and all of the Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, Petit Verdot that we grow on the property. The majority of the slopes on the property are south-facing, which is actually quite nice. During the time of maturation of the fruit on the vine, these south-facing slopes allow maximum amount of sun exposure in the afternoon sun. So the aspect of our rows going north-south, instead of giving it the morning sun where it's coolest, we're giving it its afternoon sun where it's warmest. So Santa Ynez Valley is arguably one of the most diverse growing regions for grapevines in almost the entire world. We're able to grow such a variety from the westernmost point being the coolest to the easternmost point where we are right now. There's less fog out here, more sun exposure. So we grow varieties that are more tolerant to that sun exposure over long periods of the day. Namely Bordeaux varieties, Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, Petit Verdot, and Cabernet Franc because of the thick skin. They could really handle a lot of sunlight. And that actually helps them move along during that maturation period. Every grower would love enough rain every winter to not have to irrigate throughout the growing season. Here specifically though, we just don't get quite enough rain to do what's considered dry farming. So we do help the vines out a little bit. Knowing if we're going to have a few really hot days in a row, we'll give them a little bit of water the night before, just so that they can use that water to cool themselves down during that hot spell. But we don't use it necessarily to try and grow the green material. We rely on the saturation of the earth during the rainy months to really take care of that. Once we pull the fruit off the vine, they've been depleted over a period of time where we just kind of give them a nice little re-up of water, let them drink a little bit, and that way we can kind of send them into the winter time feeling good about themselves.
Okay, Bradley, I have a silly question.
Sure, there are no silly questions.
How many grapes does it take to make a bottle of wine?
It's not the first time, nor the last time will I be asked that question. I've figured out
The geologist is picking up a rock.
I've figured out with the surface area of our grapes specifically, it'll take somewhere between 400 and 600 grapes to make a bottle of wine.
Wow. So, Bradley, what's the similarities between like a French Bordeaux wine and the Bordeaux we're drinking tonight?
So something about Bordeaux and other growing regions in France, they tend to stay very consistent with their climates. They call that terroir, and that's what gives them their sense of place. Our variations are much greater than they are in Bordeaux. So we like to give ourselves a sense of place through what we call airwar. There's a morning dew that really releases the smells of the rosemary, the sage, the lavender that's grown out here. And tasting that inside of the wines is what really gives us our sense of place. What does the sense of place mean for you?
For me, it speaks to like my family's history. Being a little kid with my parents and, running around and picking foxtails out of my socks, and my ankles and, that kind of stuff. Especially with Sauvignon Blanc, it makes me think of my mom and thinking of her like out there on a horse when she was younger. And I think terroir is such a great way to express that because for me, I always think of the sunshine out here.
I think it's great when wine can transport you into those memories And if you grew up in Santa Barbara County, you have all of that, all those smells in your mind, and it can be anything can open it up.
When we're doing tastings, people ask a lot, where do you get some of the smells and tastes that you're tasting inside what we're drinking? The answer that always comes back to me is, it's already here. It's already been experienced. It's that morning dew from the area itself, driving into work with the window down. The smells and tastes inside all of our wines, all of those descriptors are already up here. And it's just going back to those memories and pulling them out.
Well, thank you so much for your time and sharing your knowledge. It's very interesting and complex in a good way.
It is. Being able to be adaptable to our climates and our environment on a year in and year out basis, trying to keep that as consistent as possible and showing each vintage for what it is.
It works.
Cheers.
Hopefully you enjoyed that video and those amazing views, and got a little bit of an appreciation for all the different factors that go into grape growth. Next, we're going to talk a little more detail about the geology of the Happy Canyon AVA. But before I get into that, just want to remind you to go ahead and open up that bottle of red and pour yourself a glass to let it breathe, because we'll be doing that tasting just as soon as we're done talking about rocks. In the meantime, let's talk about two of the most prevalent rocks in the Happy Canyon AVA that are quite different from one another, but also very important. There's the Monterey Shale, as well as serpentinite. And so hopefully you'll see that we've got this geologic map of the Happy Canyon AVA somewhere over here, I believe. And you should see in the upper right-hand corner some bands of color, particularly blue and purple bands. Those represent the rocks that comprise the Franciscan complex. And we'd mentioned those briefly in the video as being a collection or an assemblage of rock layers from the Mesozoic era, the age of the dinosaurs or age of reptiles. So these are much older rocks than what we see in terms of the Monterey. Now, within that assemblage is the outcrops of serpentinite represented by those blue ribbons. Serpentinite is a metamorphic rock, which means it started out as something else before being altered. In this case, serpentinite started out as peridotite, which is a marine igneous rock, meaning that this was a rock that formed from molten rock, magma, that cooled down under the seafloor, deep underneath the seafloor, over an extended period of time. So this igneous rock started around 80 million years ago to get subducted underneath the North American plate in the region of Southern California. As this plate was being subducted, material from the marine plate was being, or oceanic plate was being sloughed off in what we call an accretionary wedge. And that accretionary wedge, that accumulation of sediments as well as the igneous rock, is what we see today as the uplifted Franciscan complex. In that process, the peridotite was altered because it was undergoing immense pressure, temperature, and it was all in the presence of water. So that rock underwent what we call hydrothermal alteration. And it's that alteration that spawned the generation of serpentine minerals. Serpentine minerals are actually a group of minerals. There's 3 different ones. And you'll see that there's a lot of variation in the color of serpentinite rocks. Everything from bright greens to very dark black colors. And often you'll see a glassy surface to them, something called a slick and slide, which is the result of that hydrothermal alteration. So those are really old metamorphosed igneous rocks. We've also got sedimentary rocks that have undergone a fair amount of alteration themselves. So you've probably heard of the Monterey Shale. The Monterey Formation is the main source rock for oil and hydrocarbons in California. And if you've seen an oil derrick out and about pumping away, it's probably drawing up oil from the Monterey Formation. And this was a marine layer that was deposited between 16 and 6 million years ago, and it was in basically a marine trough, a large structural deposition area. And as those sediments were being deposited, it also included a lot of bioproductivity. Little critters with silica shells, these microscopic critters called diatoms, were also living and dying and being deposited on the ocean floor. And so you get a lot of examples of these Monterey pieces that have white bands of silica-rich layers contrasted with organic-rich layers. And so it's those organics that really lead to the hydrocarbon production. What we also get though with Monterey shale is a variety of colors that include orange, spotting, and even red areas. That is the result of oxidation of iron in those rocks. And what will happen sometimes is that with the hydrocarbons in the Monterey, you can have spontaneous combustion. And so we have a picture showing the red burned shale from an outcrop in Santa Barbara County, where that hydrocarbon had ignited, or combusted I should say, and burned the surrounding shale. So it's obviously from that perspective, it's very organic rich and quite the contrast to the serpentinite, this former igneous rock that was metamorphosed. It's worth noting though that the Monterey has undergone plenty of alteration itself, being uplifted at the same time as the serpentinite rocks and Franciscan rocks in the last 6 million years. These got a pretty torturous history, and you can see plenty of really fantastic examples of different really severe and pronounced bends and folds, especially when you're walking down the coastline around Santa Barbara. So these are two of the really cool rocks that we find all over the Santa Ynez Valley, in particular throughout the Happy Canyon AVA. And with that, I'm already getting pretty thirsty. So if everyone else is ready, should we go ahead and
Let's do it.
have a drink?
It's always a good time for a little more wine. Definitely.
So, Katie and Dean, what are we drinking tonight? This red.
This is our Articondo. So this is our red Bordeaux blend. Articondo is, the backbone of this wine is Cabernet Sauvignon. So it's 55% Cabernet Sauvignon. We have a little bit of Petit Verdot on the property. So we have 35% Petit Verdot and then a little bit of Cab Franc and Merlot. And this one, we age this in French oak for around 24 months, about 50% new. And then we have our own in-house bottling, so we bottle everything in-house as well. We give it a little bottle conditioning so the wine is ready to drink and ready to enjoy upon release. So this one.
So what's our technique for red? Is it the same as white wine?
I think it's the same as for the white wine. You want to
Swirl.
give it a little swirl, give it a good sniff.
It smells
Opens up the
fantastic.
aromatics.
Yeah. With red wine, like you said, open it up a little bit early, open the bottle up, and that lets it get a little air. You know, this wine is kind of a living, breathing entity, and so it's been in that bottle for a while. It wants a little air, it wants a little oxygen to really give you all the flavors that it's capable of having. So giving it that extra swirl in the glass kind of is the continuation of that. Got the bottle open, get the swirl, get the sniff, and then take a good sip. And
so Bradley talks a lot about terroir in Happy Canyon. So what kind of terroir qualities do we taste in this wine tonight?
Oh, absolutely. That's such a great question. So, you know, Brad's a big hiker, camper. He's always out in the outdoors. So I always kind of think of like, you know, that time when you wake up, when you've been camping and there's dew on, you know, all the grass and everything. We have a lot of rosemary and lavender and sage up in the winery in the vineyard area. So I always pick up a lot of that. I get a little bit of kind of like toastiness as well. A little
Dark
bit of that.
fruits.
It's warmer.
Yeah, very
Yeah.
smooth.
Yeah.
It really Is there a good transition period in the year to go from a white to a red wine? Can you drink white after Labor Day?
Oh, that is an
Absolutely.
excellent question. Yeah. You have
Oh,
to
yeah.
put away the white pants. But
Okay.
You can stay with the white wine for sure. Absolutely. We, I mean, as my mother will attest, she can drink Sauvignon Blanc all year round. There's no reason to change that up with the seasons. And we actually have another white wine that we do. It's a Sauvignon Blanc as well, but it's our Reserve Sauv Blanc, which we age in French oak barrels.
Yeah.
And that I actually call that our winter white wine. It's perfect for the Thanksgiving table. Like
yeah.
it just goes so great with, you know, the turkey and the stuffing and the gravy. And that's definitely a white wine. And rosé, you always say rosé is great for Thanksgiving too.
Yeah, rosés. You can drink rosé all year long.
Yeah.
We live in such a beautiful part of.
I can attest that I can't drink rosé
Yeah,
all year
it's
long.
great.
Yeah.
We make rosé of Cabernet as well,
managed.
so
Yeah.
it's perfect. But yeah,
And-
Oh, sorry.
No, please go ahead. Continue.
Articondo is just very easy drinking. It's you know, we bottle this wine and to be enjoyed upon release. It's got very soft, very easy drinking. There's a lot of beautiful rounded fruit and structure when you take a first sip, and then that oak shines through on the finish there.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, and that same your question about the seasonality of drinking
Yeah.
a different wine. You know, this is our red wine that I always think of summertime barbecues for this.
Yep.
If you brought Articondo to a barbecue, no one is going to complain.
Yeah.
When I drink this wine, like I think steaks, I think ribs, baby back ribs, anything like that. This is just dying to go with that kind of meat. So.
perfect food
Yeah.
wine.
And a good transition to the evening to kind of warm yourself up.
Oh yeah.
You know, a
Absolutely.
warm summer day or
Yeah,
yeah.
definitely.
So this is a very natural history wine. It's an aged in oak, as we have so many here on our property. What's the difference between aging this Articondo in the oak barrels versus your Sauvignon Blanc in the stainless steel that you mentioned
That's a
earlier?
great question.
That's a great question. You wanna-
So the oak for us, the oak helps add a little more depth to the wine. If you age red wine in stainless steel, you end up with a beautiful wine, but you taste a lot more of the fruit
Yeah.
there. And when you age with oak, it adds a little more of that kind of toasted little spice to it that's shining through from the French oak. And then it really builds a finish, a nice structure
Yeah.
at the finish there. So very long, lengthy finish. We use around 50% new. When we use new French oak, the barrel flavors are much stronger than that of a used French oak, and that kind of softens the wine and makes it very rounded. It gives a nice finish to it.
So, as Bradley also talked about, in terms of adding something extra to the soil in your sort of off-season gypsum to add some calcium, you're trying to also kind of add a little bit of influence with the oak to the red wine. Whereas the white wine in the stainless steel, you really want that grape to shine by itself.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the red wine. I mean, it adds layers of complexity to the red wine to get that spiciness. A lot of winemakers will actually have wine coopers, barrel makers from different areas, different forests. You can get French oak, Hungarian oak, American oak. And they'll also toast the inside of the barrels where they actually burn them a little bit, and you can pick what level of, do you want a lot of, burn and toast in there, or do you want just a little bit? And so they'll have, they won't, a good winemaker won't just have one barrel from one place with one type of toastiness. They're going to want a bunch of different varieties, and they'll actually refer to it as their spice rack.
Oh, cool.
It just
Yep.
adds different layers.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
And how can you decide, you talked about these wines which kind of go year to year, but the wines that you're developing for later on, how do you know when that grape is ready?
When the wine is ready to be.
Well, when the grape is, because you start
Ready to be
growing,
picked.
you're ready to be picked and to be created into like harvested and actually bottled into a wine?
Oh yeah, so that has to do a lot with taste.
Yeah.
Bradley's constantly going out there. Like I said, every morning he's out there tasting different parts of the vineyard and different blocks and trying to determine, like, are those flavors there. I always think winemakers are kind of like fortune-telling wizards, because he's literally, as he's going through, he's tasting these grapes and kind of imagining like how that is going to translate into wine in a barrel and how that barrel is going to influence it. And then for the red wines, it takes 18 to 24 months that they're in the barrel.
Yeah.
And then he's blending the different wines when he's ready to make the finished product. And, when he's putting those blends together and determining what that final blend is going to be, he's still thinking in terms of how is this going to taste when it's bottled? How is it going to taste? Most reds are kind of a little tight when they're first bottled for about 6 months after that. And he's thinking like, okay, how's this going to taste 6 months after bottling? And then a year when we release it, and then 5, 10, 15 years down the line. And so that I think it's just a wizardry to be able to think that far in advance.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
He must have a very well-developed palate.
Yes, yeah. Well, he's from New Orleans, and that's like the epicenter of spice and flavors.
Oh,
so I
yeah.
think he's got a good background for
Absolutely, he does.
Sounds like it.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure I can chat with you about all the different, and keep drinking this wine, but I'm sure our audience out there has lots of questions to ask too. So let's hear some of those.
that. We'd love to.
For sure.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Let's do it.
All right, thank you, Kim. Yes, we have a double magnum worth of questions from our audience at home. And I want to start by asking you, Katie. I know in the past you've shared a little bit about how the family got into this property. Have you always had wine in your blood, or how did the Grassini Family Vineyards start?
I feel like nowadays, with 2020 being what it is, there's always a little wine in my blood right now.
Yeah.
But no, my parents actually bought the land back in the 80s. There had been this 1,000-acre thoroughbred horse breeding ranch that they broke up into these 100-acre parcels. And I'm the oldest of 4 girls, and my parents realized at a certain point they were going to have 4 teenage daughters running around, and they thought, we're going to have to give them as much space as possible. So they started looking and purchased one of those 104-acre parcels. And they didn't necessarily have wine on their minds at that point. I was a big horseback rider when I was growing up, and so my dad and I would go trail riding. And so Dad thought, well, maybe we'll breed horses, even though we didn't really know that much about breeding horses. So he started riding more often and promptly had a terrible crash on a horse, actually. It flipped over. It was a whole crazy thing. And then shortly after that, my mom found out that she's completely allergic to alfalfa hay. So it was just...
That's not a good recipe.
No, it was it was going to be the shortest retirement. No, they were not going to survive their retirement. So they pivoted, as is the term for 2020, and just kind of leased the land out for a long time to a next door neighbor who was raising cutting horses for her cattle to graze on that she was practicing with. And then a few years later, they went to the Santa Barbara Vintners Association, has a Vintners Festival every spring. And they went and did that and just loved it. They loved going around, and they realized that all the vintners that they were meeting were these wonderful families, family-owned wineries. They were meeting the actual winemakers, and it was so different from any experience they'd had up in other wine country areas.
Sure.
And they just thought, well, we have this space. Let's see if it's, if it would work for wine grapes. And so they called out the experts who came out and looked at all the different soils, the geology, the slopes that we have, the weather patterns. And my dad was pretty surprised when he turned to them and said, plant the Bordeaux varietals, because everyone else was planting Pinot closer to the coastlines.
Yeah.
And so, they're my parents are smart people. They listened to the experts and they went with it, and we're pretty glad they did.
That's fantastic.
The rest is history.
That's just history.
Right?
At what point did the Happy Canyon AVA get designated?
Yeah, that's a great question. So AVAs are so important to consumers. They really let you know kind of what to look for from that area. And Santa Barbara is such a huge county. It's so diverse. There's so many microclimates, and there's places where it's just meant for Pinot Noir, and there's places where Pinot would not do great on our property. It's just too hot. They turn into raisins. So we petitioned the AVA for the AVA status. It was granted in 2009. So it took quite a while for it to happen. And it's a big stack of papers that you have to submit to the government, including everything from soil to weather, like I said, all the way down to why you want to name it, what's the historical significance of the name.
Yeah.
And so with us, it was Happy Canyon, and we were really trying to find out, where did that come from? And finally, someone asked one of the older generations, do you remember, why do we always call it Happy Canyon? And it turns out there's a creek that runs through Happy Canyon, and back in the days of Prohibition, that's where all the folks were who had the stills. So if you went up to that canyon, you would come back happy.
Take a little road trip. To get
Yeah, exactly. So we like to think we're
Very
kind of
appropriate.
continuing that tradition,
I
but
totally agree.
a slightly more elevated manner now. So
And legal.
yes, legal, exactly.
What does AVA stand for?
It's American Viticultural Area.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
And there's more than one vineyard in your AVA,
Yes.
essentially.
Yeah.
So you're really a community of winemakers around there.
Yeah, which is really great. Santa Barbara, I think, has a really great winemaking community.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, there are other areas where it's, a little bit cutthroat. People keep everything very close to the vest. They won't say what type of yeast they're using or how they solved a certain problem.
Right.
And I've talked to several winemakers who have moved from other areas and come down to Santa Barbara, and they're always kind of blown away by how open everybody is with, wanting to share their knowledge and help one another out. And it's just, I think, Santa Barbara County is just like that. Yeah, it really is a great community. It's nice to be a part of that, We've all seen it when we've all gone through tough things in this county. Neighbors pitch in,
Right.
so.
What other questions
another question,
do you
Luke?
have for us, Luke?
Well, I think what we're hearing from everybody on chat is we're really glad your folks decided to go to wine instead of horses. We are all the beneficiaries of that, so thank you.
Definitely. We're definitely glad that they did.
Oh, yeah.
It's been really fun.
Folks are asking, what are the sustainability practices that you practice at the vineyard?
Yeah. Well, sustainability is so important. My parents wanted to, when they started this winery and this vineyard, to make as small an impact as possible on the earth, because winemaking especially is one of those multi-generational kind of things. It's such an investment to plant the vines, to put in all the infrastructure there, and then it takes the vines 5 years before they produce a grape that you'll make a wine with, and then it's another 2 or 3 years that it's in a barrel before you'll even put it in a bottle, and then it's another year before you put it out to the public. So it's a long time. And knowing that, they wanted to really, not scar the land.
Absolutely.
So we do a lot. All the buildings are made with reclaimed wood on the exterior, which is from either abandoned gold mines in Colorado that they were not using. So we took the wood from that and put it on up in the winery, or old rafts that were used in the Columbia River. And there are these big, beautiful wooden timbers that they were able to pull out from the bottom of the river after they'd sunk about 150 years ago, and then reuse those to build the winery with. And they're, sustainable, but they're also gorgeous, and
Absolutely.
they have such a story behind them.
Yeah.
And then we also put in solar panels all throughout the property. So if you look at the barn, behind the winery, kind of hidden, there's quite a lot of solar panels
all over the place.
Yeah, and that gets us off the grid for most of the year. And then we also, with grape growing, they don't require, as Bradley said, they don't require a ton of water to actually grow the grapes. But once you get them into the winery, you have to keep everything so hygienic to make sure that, a ferment doesn't take off on you. So we're constantly cleaning the stainless steel tanks, so we do as much, cleaning the barrels. Yeah, so we're doing as much as we can to keep things clean, but also use the least amount of water. So we'll use steam whenever that's an option, because that uses a lot less water. And then we also have grates that go all the way through the winery that reclaim all that water and then reuse that. It actually gets processed underground alongside the driveway to the winery, and then we're able to reuse that water for irrigation.
Oh, wonderful.
So.
That's wonderful. It's so innovative, all the different things and that your parents have found and created to kind of upcycle into something beautiful, especially
Yeah.
in the Santa Ynez
Yeah.
Valley.
It's amazing what they went through to do all that. And I remember when they were talking about the plans, and I didn't really understand, why the reclaiming the water was so important.
Right.
That was back in 2010, and then we went through the drought, and I was like, oh, now I get it.
Yeah.
That was really smart, Dad.
All makes sense
Good
now.
job, Mom.
Yeah.
Good thinking.
In looking towards the future, it seems, one of the big aspects of your part of the valley is it is much warmer. If it continues to get warmer, what lies ahead for the Grassini Vineyard?
Yeah, well, I mean, climate change is definitely a thing. It's definitely happening, and we're seeing it, with the droughts that we've had to go through. For us, like I said, wine grapes don't require a lot of water, but it's more a concern for the long-term health of the grapes, of the vines.
Yeah.
As the grapes are growing, the salts are being kind of leached up to the topsoil, and we rely on those big, heavy, winter and springtime rains to drop a lot of water on those roots and push the salts and the minerals that are being pulled up back into the soil, so they don't damage the vines long term. So it's more that concern. And as far as climate change, I mean, we're seeing it, Napa Valley has just had some of the worst fires
Right.
ever, and
Yep.
we've lost some really beautiful chateaus and vineyards that, I mean, that's a piece of American history that's gone and is going to take a long time to rebuild and recover from. And so I think for us down here in the Santa Ynez Valley, winemakers are going to be looking towards what types of vines might be a little bit more drought tolerant, what clones and rootstock might be able to handle, not having as much water.
Is there any concern about wildfire smoke affecting the taste of your grapes?
It's a great question, and for us, where we are in Happy Canyon, we were saved from the smoke this year. The past fires we had here in Santa Barbara County, all of our fruit was already picked and was in the winery, so it was a little later in the year. For us, we always try to think of the wildfire. Smoke is it clings to everything.
Yeah.
So it's similar to when you're camping, you sit close to a fire, that smoke will stick to your clothes. That's similar to grapes. For us, we were far enough away that didn't happen for us, but if a fire is close by or you see ash, this definitely starts for any farmer or winemaker, raises an eyebrow and cause for concern. So, but for us, thankfully, although the sky looked pretty dull out there, we didn't pick up any smoke problems out there.
We were really fortunate, and that's winemaking, there is a huge scientific aspect to it. So part of what Bradley does when he's going out there and tasting the grapes as we get closer to harvest to see if they're ready to harvest, he's also picking some and putting them in bags to send to labs to just test them for different chemistries, but they also are able to test for smoke taint. So we were very fortunate that we were able to test for that and look for that, and we were okay. But the labs are very busy this year.
I bet.
Unfortunately, it's really a shame.
Luke, next question.
Just time for two more questions. This one is actually from me, and it's for Dean. I have a real problem with wine. I buy it intending to lay it down, and within just a few days it evaporates.
Oh no.
So I know you said these are very approachable wines right when they're released, but if someone did have the discipline to
Yes.
store them for longer than a week, how long could I store your wines?
Well, first of all, I would recommend getting a lock on your wine fridge. That helps as well. But I would say for our Happy Canyon Sauvignon Blanc, you can, and it's with the nice bright acidity in this wine. The Sauvignon Blanc I would enjoy, upon release. First couple of years, it'll be showing beautifully. For our Articondo, we have the oak and the tannin structure in there. You could age this 15 plus years, but the way we have the profile of this wine on the first sip, we've kind of crafted this wine to enjoy it upon release as well. We give it a little bottle aging, so the wine is not as shocky. And if you want to look into wine and shocked wine, bottle shock is a great movie to watch. That goes through a couple of months where the wine is just a little wind up, a little held back. And
Yeah.
for us, with having that extended bottle aging, we can kind of let it mature as it upon release.
It's ready to go.
Yeah.
Well, thanks. I mean, if Articondo would last for 15 years, what that says to me, Dean, is I need to buy a 15-year supply.
You know,
Right?
I would 100% agree. And and definitely hide that key.
Yeah.
I'll leave the key with you. How's that?
Perfect.
And here's our final question. Of course, everyone wants to know, where can they enjoy your fine wines? Can you tell us about the tasting room? Is the vineyard open to the public?
Absolutely, yeah. So the tasting room is right downtown. It's in the beautiful historic heart of Santa Barbara in the Presidio neighborhood, just a few blocks from the courthouse. And it's in the El Paseo building. And we've been really fortunate. Right now, we're able to have all outdoor patio seating spread out. It's really actually a beautiful place to taste some wine and look at the red brick roofs of the El Paseo. And then in general, our winery has been not open to the public. It's been mostly for wine club members. But with us wanting to get people outside right now and really enjoy nature and enjoy the fresh air and spend some time with their family, we have been opening it up a little bit so folks can reach out to us and see if they can make an appointment to come up and visit and taste some wines with us. So we'd love to have everyone come visit. Now that we've had,
And I can attest of how beautiful it is. And it, filming the video on your property, it was sort of a great mini escape to even just be within Santa Barbara County, but a little bit away from home and into nature and in that way. So it's fantastic. You have to go.
we loved having you guys up there. It was so much fun. We learned a lot just watching and listening to Brad and you guys talking and
And you have the most beautiful dog that I would happy to dog sit.
shout out to Duffy.
Yeah. It's our dog child.
Yep.
Half vineyard, half city dog.
Right.
Well, folks, I'm sorry to interrupt, but it's time to wrap it up. I want to thank all of you for joining us. I want to thank our crack tasting team, Katie, Dean, Jonathan, and Kim. I want to thank our corporate sponsors, Grassini Family Vineyards, of course, Town and Country Event Rentals, and the Berry Man. We have individual sponsors that are tuning in, Pam and Terry Valesky, Brad Willis, and Tony Pusatai. Thank you, folks, for being individual sponsors. Keep an eye on your email. We're going to solicit your feedback on this event. We also have our second episode queued up in December. We'll be releasing that date soon. And our motto for this series is, don't be sad that you've reached the end of the bottle. Be glad, because now you can open up the next one. Thank you and have a good night, folks.